Thank you, Dr. Williams. The title of this panel is Between the World and Citizenship, and it features 5 freshman women who are going to interrogate the text from a number of different angles. 2 of them will discuss the text from a foundation of literary criticism, and the other 2 will kind of do a nonfiction creative perspective on some of the themes of the text. So without further ado, they're going to present in the order that their names appear. So Aiden Keyes, who will be joined by Renee Harris, will be presenting on Youth as a Woman, Black Womanhood, and Claudia Rankin's Citizen. She'll be actually followed by London Davis, who will present on Context, as explained in Claudia Rankin's Citizen, an American Lyric. And then Sukenya Juth will present Where Our Real Citizenship Lies. And then we'll end with Savina Barini Brown, who will present My Citizenship, a Voice from the Midwest. So, Ms. Keyes and Ms. Harris, would you join me?
Hello, my name is Aiden Keyes. I'm a freshman English major from Tacoma Park, Maryland.
I'm Renee Harris. I'm a political science and economics double major from New York.
And today we will be presenting You as a Woman, Black Womanhood, and Claudia Rankin's Citizen. In part 1 of Citizen, we meet a character named You. You is supposed to be an avatar that the reader can navigate through to experience different sorts of racism, different experiences of racism. And though You doesn't explicitly have a gender or have a body type, assuming that You would be cisgender, I would conclude that You is a woman. This is because of the certain actions that You takes in response to racism and because of the inner monologue that You goes through with racism. I believe that the way that You navigates through the world is because of the sexism perpetrated against her and because of the racism perpetrated against her. So to conclude this, I interviewed a couple Howard students, women students, to make sure that that this was a cohesive narrative, that I was making sense. So I interviewed a couple Howard students to see how they told stories and how they dealt with different types of racism, experiences of racism.
I felt like I was racially profiled.
So when I started working, I was training for like a week, and at my work it was like the same 3 customers that would come in the morning, and I always trained during the mornings because it wasn't busy. So there's this old white dude who's like from Texas, and he was a math teacher, and he came in every single Saturday and Sunday morning, and so I would never serve him because I was training, but my supervisor would serve him. And then one day I tried to serve him because I had like been done training. And he like wouldn't let me. He'd be like, can I please see a manager? Can I like have your supervisor serve me instead? And I was like, it's literally just coffee. And I didn't understand at first. I was like, am I doing something wrong? And then he like wouldn't look at me either. It was so weird. And then like my supervisor came and he was like totally the same. And she's a white lady.
I felt like I was racially profiled the other week when I went to Forever 21 and I took a lot of things to the dressing room because I like to shop. And I was going to cash out and buy all the shit I took to the dressing room. So, you don't have to quote that. So, I went, and the white guy that was back there working, he like damn near runs to the phone. Like he was moving really quickly. He like damn near ran to the phone, and he was talking really low, and I didn't even know it was possible to speak that low and be heard. And I think he was talking about me. And then like when I was in the dressing room trying on clothes, I saw his shoes, like his feet literally kept going back and forth, and I was the only person back there. And it's like he was waiting for me to come out, and like he literally counted my stuff. Like, does anyone count your stuff when you come out? Like for real? For real, count your stuff. He counted my stuff, and like I stood there while he counted my stuff, like I had to wait.
So straight away, I noticed some similarities with these stories. First of all, there's the word like. The word like is used as a modifier in teenage vernacular when you want to modify certain facts, when you're not sure of something. But deeper than that, I also noticed the word literally. The word literally is used when you're really emphatic about something, when you really want to place emphasis on something, and when you're really emotional about something. And I believe that when women tell stories, we're really emotional about the moment itself because we bottle so much of those emotions while they're happening. We don't use them to confront the people who are actually perpetrating the racist action. This is because we are also socialized not to confront people. So there's also a lot of hesitancy to accuse. In the first story, I noticed a lot of, I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't ask the man why he didn't want me to serve him. There was just a lot of uncertainty, even though she knew that this man was racist. The second girl is a little bit more confident about the story, but she does ask at the end, does this ever happen to you? She didn't ever confront the man for what he was doing. So there's a lot of distancing from the situation between the emotion of storytelling in the actual moment with women friends and between the actual situation without confrontation. In Citizen, I noticed a lot of this. For example, on page 7, right off the bat, we have somebody ruminating over what's happened. They don't actually confront the person for being racist against them, for confusing them with another housekeeper, with another black woman. They just ruminate over the event over and over again and ask themselves what had happened. We see, if this were a domestic tragedy, and it might well be, this would be your fatal flaw, your memory, vessel of your feelings. Do you feel hurt because it's the all black people look the same moment, or because you are being confused with another after being so close to this other? So at the same time, this person isn't confronting the person even though they know that the racist action has happened to them. And this is because of sexism and the combination of racism. We also see this on page 16, which is coincidentally the story that the first person really resonated with because she saw herself as one of the teenagers who the man had called the N-word. But I'd say that we can also resonate with the story on a different level because this person, although she confronts the person for calling her the N-word, she never really, she doesn't do it again. She just asks herself a question and then she smiles. And when we smile as women, we're taught to bottle up our emotions and we're taught to take those emotions and contort them and then make them into a smile. We're taught never actually to show them or to confront people again. It says, "There you go," you ask, feeling irritation begin to rain down? Yes, and something about hearing yourself repeating the stranger's accusation in a voice usually reserved for your partner makes you smile. So I believe that through these internal monologues, these questions, this rumination over the event and the inaction of the actual event to confront the people is a product of racism and sexism.
So when talking about Claudia Rankin's Citizen, Eden and I spoke about how her use of you in her narratives allowed for a variety of stories that were more relatable to the readers. This is especially noteworthy because it allowed for discussions of what it means to live in a marginalized body, not just as a black man, but also as a black woman. Experiences such as not being seen as the only female person of color in the classroom, being confused for others with similar complexions, or being subjected to discussion about having to hire people of color were all experiences I could relate to. Without specifying a subject, she spotlights feelings that can come with certain racialized experiences. Other examples were when a woman said that she felt opportunities had been taken away from her because of affirmative action, or seeing a young child be disrespectfully and unapologetically pushed by an adult stranger. The vignette structure was powerful because of the repetition, and its similarities sprinkled by differences heightened the impact of the vignettes in the novel. I also wanted to say that we also read Between the World and Me, and in comparison, it was a very strong and powerful book, but I think the way Citizen was set up, it allowed for the variety of stories I was saying to be applied to not just men of color, which is often what we see, but also women of color. And so I could identify with it, and I thought, if I can identify with it, if I can identify with the stories, I think it's that much closer to someone who hasn't experienced these to also feel the experiences that people of color feel.
Thank you. So we would like to know if you intended for you to be a woman, and if that was something that you were conscious of. Thank you.
Hello, my name is London Davis. I'm a freshman biology major from Houston, Texas. And today I will be making my presentation on context as explained in Claudia Rankin's Citizen, an American Lyric. Context. What happens when you take an African American out of context? When you remove the situation from which they are in, from which they came from? Are their actions seen as just? Can one viably judge the content of another's character without knowing the context? As humans, our actions and reactions change based on the circumstances we are placed in. As African Americans, those actions and reactions vary not only based on our circumstances, but also where we stand as citizens of America at any given day and time. When tensions in America are high, such as after the first black president is elected, or after yet another young African American male has just lost his life, our tolerance, their tolerance, may not be as high as if it were a normal day. The day can be considered normal when the usual amount of racial injustice that we receive on a daily basis is all we have to deal with. That is the day we can laugh off the insult or do what we know will cause the least amount of turmoil in the situation. Those so-called normal days, however, still take a toll on our bodies because, according to Claudia Rankin, yes, the body has memory. To the point where one day that comment that you could normally laugh about or that stare that you could usually brush off stands as your tipping point. And all of a sudden, your anger is subject to their judgment. Will you get a pass that day? Or is any day where your anger as an African American is expressed seen as a typical day to them? Because when it comes to judging us, context does not matter. In Claudia Rankin's Citizen, when discussing Serena Williams' punishment for her outburst in 2009 at the U.S. Open, Rankin suggests that the committee's punishment decision is perhaps only about context. Although Williams' fine might have been less had the match not been a Grand Slam, and her probationary period would have been on a smaller stage, it can still be expected that, other things constant, she would have still lost the match simply because she is black. The effect that her reaction had on the tennis world, on America in general, would have still been just as massive of an uproar simply because she is black. Her context does not matter. The match that was so inexcusably called against Williams in 2004 does not matter. When it comes to her judgment by anyone who does not understand what it means to suffer based on the color of one's skin, to be trapped in that racial imaginary, trapped in disbelief, the context, her context of dealing with severe racism on and off the court for so many years does not matter. In contrast, however, when it comes to how we conduct ourselves, context always matters. Where you are, who you are with, who you are around becomes pivotal as to who you are. We often conduct ourselves differently based on who we know is watching. Such a concept is a natural human response, but for us, it can literally be the difference between life and death. One of Rankin's vignettes is about a man who is promoting his book on humor when someone in the audience asks, "What makes something funny?" She says, his answer is what you expect, context. The vignette goes on to describe how if someone said something like about someone and you were with your friends, you would probably laugh. But if they said it out in public where black people could hear what was said, you might not, probably would not. Only then do you realize you are among the others out in public and not among friends. This situation does not only apply to laughter, but from everything from being pulled over by the police to how much you enjoy yourself at a nice restaurant. Rankin tells us that context is not meaning. So the context of a situation cannot define who we are inherently, but it can and often does change how we express ourselves. Why are we the ones who have to change? Why must we adjust? And why are there consequences to us not adjusting? When you laugh in the wrong context, you're seen as insensitive or judgmental. When you say what is perhaps the right thing, but the context in which you are in, not that in which you are speaking, but the context in which you are surrounded by, makes you unintelligent or causes you to receive the stare. Did Serena Williams lose context by, as Rankin describes it, abandoning all rules of civility? Or maybe her actions should just make us take a step back and think about who set these rules and why it is we follow them. Because in following these rules, these unwritten but widely known set of rules, we tend not to exist in the moment. Our context always matters because everyone's eyes are always on us. Lastly is the context of racism itself. In the Serena Williams vignette, Rankin says in response to Williams' outburst and punishment, "Perhaps this is how racism feels no matter the context. Randomly, the rules everyone else gets to play by no longer apply to you. All of a sudden, the land of the free and the home of the brave must not be where you live." To follow Rankin's analogy in this vignette, to be black in America means that we are not governed by the country in which we live, but by a collapsed relationship that promised to play by the rules. Those rules being the set of laws that ensure equality for all. Those rules being the idea that racism is unjust no matter the context. Those rules being the standard set that we are in compliance with that make us citizens of this country. Thank you. And my question for you is how we change the context of a situation as opposed to merely reacting to it.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sukaina Ju. I am a freshman biology major from Senegal, West Africa. In considering the idealistic nature of citizenship, one must keep in mind the history of those at hand. Being that I am of a Senegalese background, looking into my country's history, we were citizens of the French Empire. This eventually led to the French-like behavior or nature that is prominent in my country. The adoption of the French language, attire, food, news, names, and so much more. Mentally, we have assumed that we are now French. But in reality, no matter how many times we call each other chérie, madame, Jean-Pierre, mademoiselle, they, the Frenchmen, will never, jamais, consider us one of them. No matter how much skin bleach, perm, or cache bag you have, you are always below the white French male. In the midst of all the madness, a new race was born, the Métis. The Métis, translating to a mixture, is a mix between the two, French and Senegalese. Similar to what has happened here in the United States, that new race that is confined between the two worlds, that of the dominant Europeans and the ancestral African heritage, so rich, one drop irrefutably declares your Africanness. In one of them, their definition of a citizen is defined, eliminating that void that exists between the white world and him. Throughout the text, the term self is repeated. For a long time, a black person's self was defined as his lack of whiteness, engraved into the minds of his family for generations and generations. This man is forced to cultivate a definition to who he is. He uses his historic self to define himself today, and remarks that throughout history, he has been taught and lectured on how his people have been oppressed, subdued to oppression, and are perpetually oppressed today. The oppressors justify their oppression through social and religious means. This man holds dear to his very existence. Within this structural makeup of who he is, the expectation of blackness is thrown at him, as a reminder to why he does not behave or why he is not seen as the white man. Why do you feel more black when you're thrown against a white background? Maybe perhaps your whole life, this concept of blackness has been etched in your brain as a stain, hindering the prosperity of this very nation you call your home. In Senegal, though we faced another form of oppression, we are citizens. We are the citizens who inhabit our lands. This is understandable. Because we are not ripped from our source of pride and nobility that is used as a source that defines us today. A citizen should find patriotism in his pride, nobility, and history. With the history of your people utterly disrespected, undocumented, and tarnished, what is the black man blessed with? Slavery, the only thing that haphazardly remained an aspect that the white man felt necessary to keep? This is no coincidence. The cost of his prosperity was the oppression of our people. Hence is his only source of nobility, pride, thus his citizenship as an American. My views might be a bit radical, but this is because I am from this ancestral noble land of various kings, queens, and pharaohs, and I irrefutably am aware that I am a citizen of Africa, more specifically Senegal. Moreover, this void that I see prominent in this country and over in her Latin American cousins, that's prominent for all blacks outside of the boundaries of Africa, has been filled with the roots of my ancestors and are indeed deeply engraved within, constantly watered and never forgotten. I have concluded, without a doubt, African Americans are not citizens of the United States of America. The fact that the Constitution had to be amended to include our freedom, suffrage, and citizenship is an undeniable claim to why we do not belong here. The fact that there are threats to blacks today is another testament to our lack of citizenship in this country. We are indeed Africans, and though it is radical to say, we will never acquire the citizenship we deserve outside of our home, the motherland, Africa.
Hi, I'm Savina Barini. I'm a freshman musical theater major from Twin Falls, Idaho. 3 things really quickly. One is I'm irresponsible. I did not send in, I thought I sent in my thing and I saved it as a draft instead. So because I'm sensitive, the actual title of this is Stifling a Sigh. I'm not actually from the Midwest. Idaho's like touching Washington, so there's that. 2 is I just wanted to clear up because a friend of mine didn't know. Y'all know what a teeth suck is? It's like that thing? Yeah, okay, just making sure. And 3, I lived in a very small, very predominantly white, very Mormon town. There were about 200 people in my high school, 26 in my graduating class, and 4 of us in the whole high school were black. 1 was me, 1 was my brother, 1 was on the running team with us, and 1 I don't actually know her. So, context for that. And then this is a piece I wrote around that experience. The thing about a sigh is that the longer you hold it in, the louder it becomes. Sometimes it starts with a literal sigh. We're discussing affirmative action today in AP government. You're the only person of color in the room. You don't want to hear any of this. The sigh turns sharper. It is a teeth suck as the teacher tells you, we are going to discuss this civilly. Heads turn as you make a noise no one else in the room is capable of. The rolling eyes, the grumbling, the whining were all ignored. Even as you slouched lower in your chair and crossed your arms, there was no response. How did this one sound turn all eyes toward you? Can you stay after class? The white teacher asks. You have lived too many moments out of feel-good civil rights summer blockbusters. The white teacher will give you detention for being openly disrespectful, even though none of your classmates were reprimanded for their exasperation with having to hear about the crimes of their grandparents. You stifle your sigh and you take the detention. The next day you hide your headphones in your cupped hand to listen during class to music in a language you can understand. You have a meeting after school and your record can't afford another detention. The first one was for punching a classmate in the nose. Your record says you were violent with another student. His record does not say he called you the smart-ass mulatto girl. You stifled your sigh and you took the detention. Your second one came for shouting at a student and later at the teacher. You tell the head of schools that the teacher let the boy use a slur, but you got scolded for cursing at the boy for using it. The head of schools says no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. You stifled your sigh, and you took the detention. The catalyst this time is entering the government classroom and hearing a disgruntled boy whose favorite word starts with N and rhymes with trigger tossing around your name. You stop before crossing the threshold. The white teacher catches your eye, but you press one finger to your lips to see what this boy will say when he thinks you cannot hear. I mean, it's annoying. Why does she even care? She's not even black. What's her problem? You should ask her, the teacher responds, gesturing to your stony face. You stand between the two of them and spit your mother's melanin in his face. Even if I weren't black, you'd still be a bigot. You choke back tears and give your best black woman militant strut to the car. You pull over after a block, unable to steer through racking sobs. The white teacher drives past you on his way home. You are not called to the office the next day. You do not receive a detention. Out of habit, you stifle your sigh, though this time it is one of relief. Thank you.
So now we will have Professor Rankin come up and give her response to the presentations.
Hi again. Okay. All right, let's start. I'll start in the beginning. So, Aiden and Renee first. You as a woman, the question of whether or not the use of the second person was intended to hold the body or voice of the black female speaker is a good one. And the answer is yes and no. I mean, that you is intended to hold whoever feels they can hold it. And it, I think, holds the black female speaker in part because I am a black female speaker. But I know that women who are Asian feel like they can step into that you and hold it. I know that women who are Hispanic or Mexican from Latin America feel like they can step into that you and hold it. I know that certain white women have said they can step into that you and hold it. So I think it probably might feel most natural because it came out of this body onto the page. But if I were to tell you exactly who told me each of those stories, I think sometimes you would be surprised. I mean, some of those stories actually came from white women. They came from, because they can be held by anybody who felt what was coming at them was racist. So it was more a sense of knowing the racism and receiving it as such, rather than only about skin color. So, but for the most part, I agree with you. I think that it is a site that holds me because I was generating that you. But when I was really interested in hearing that you referred to as an avatar site, a kind of cisgender site. I never really thought about it. I thought the way I was thinking about the use of the second person or the pronominal space inside those pieces was as a site, not as an avatar or a person. That it was really a space to enter, and when one entered that space as a reader, one would have to then embody who they thought the you was. And if they wanted to bring a black woman's body to that you, they were free to do that. But if they felt another body could also hold that space, they could also do that. So for me, it was a place to almost to step inside of and then to negotiate the moment through. But I loved this idea of it being an avatar. One of the lines in that initial presentation that I think I will remember for the rest of my life came out of one of the videos. It was a woman, I think it was the shopper woman, the woman who was going to buy everything. She said, "I didn't know it was possible to speak that low and be heard. I didn't know it was possible to speak that low and be heard." And I found that a fascinating line, that sense that, because I began to think about that man, that white man, the white security guy or whoever who felt like he needed to count the outfits. I began to wonder, did he want to be heard? You know, that whether or not the articulation was actually meant to arrive, so that the whisper was actually never about a private articulation. It was always a public one. I didn't know it was possible to speak that low and be heard. And I also appreciated the list of internal monologues, questions, ruminations, and actions. Partly because a lot of the moments that were referred to, it was interesting to hear them read differently than I had thought about them when I was writing them. You know, for example, the voice reserved for your partner, that piece, when I was writing it, the way I imagined that smile worked was that when you get angry with somebody and that person is somebody very close to you. I don't know if you have this, maybe it's a failing of my own, but when I am angry with my husband and he says something to me, I find myself repeating it back to him. Like he says, you're always X, and I'm like, I'm always X. And so that dynamic of repeating back the offending statement, when I wrote that in the piece, for me it was a moment of intimacy with this stranger. That it was a sudden moment when the level of irritation actually was a private level of irritation that was now being shared with a perfect stranger who normally you had nothing to say with. But because we have entered into this historical moment in terms of the history of racism, the use of the word nigger, the use of the word KKK, suddenly we become intimates in this moment. So that was actually the way in which I was thinking about that moment. So it's always interesting to hear a different reading. So Simone, it's not all black. Did that happen? No. Okay. Because I thought somehow I missed that one. So I'm glad to know that I am not losing my marbles up here. Okay. So London Davis, I love the investigation of context and breaking rules and making rules, and this idea of the body having memory, and that for all of us, the accumulation of these microaggressions inside the body and the negotiation of these day-to-day transgressions always land us in these moments that were called tipping points, so that the moment becomes, there is always a moment that just is one too many moments. And so one feels trapped, and then one is reacting to that feeling. The question that Ms. Davis had was how do we change the context as opposed to merely reacting? And I thought there must be a really good example of this, but I couldn't think of one because then the next presentation started. So I'm still thinking about that. How do we change the context? But I think, I think one of the ways I feel that one can change the context in terms of these encounters is to call them out immediately. Because I think we have been brought up in a culture where to speak and to disagree is read as bad form. And in fact, to challenge a moment is good form. And why we feel that if we make other people uncomfortable, we are suddenly out of form. I think maybe it comes from, when you're kids and your mom's like, don't take that tone with me. Which I often say to my daughter, and she's like, don't take that tone with me. And I'm like, how do you define tone, honey? She thinks and she looks at me like, what? But that sense that, we should be able to challenge that moment and investigate that moment. And I think that's how the context changes. Because I think you might say, oh, my daughter is being disrespectful by saying, don't take that tone with me. But in fact, what she does is reframe the question of what tone is. I mean, when she said that, she did say that to me once, and I did think, how are you defining tone? Because, I'm thinking that I'm angry, but what are you hearing? And so if somebody says something to you, and I'll say this as an example. I'm at Columbia at the Center for Social Justice. I think some of you might know this story. And a woman has just, the head of the Center for Social Justice, not just any woman, but the woman who is the head of the Center for Social Justice, comes up to me, and we've just seen a film where there were 4 black men, and each of those men had a mother in the film. And she says, can you remember which of the men had the mother who sounded white? And I said to her, that's racist. And she's like, wait, no, that's not what I meant. And I'm like, I don't know what you meant, but that's racist. I'm like, at what point is education owned by whiteness? When did that happen? It has not yet happened in my world. And so the context of that interaction changed. And so we, instead of moving forward inside a racist frame, we were then inside a frame of investigating a presumption that has its roots inside racism. So I think that's how it happens. It happens, I could have been pissed off and walked away, but instead we actually, I was like, you need to think about that. I don't know if she actually thought about it, but the questions one has, but I know that, in a way it doesn't matter what she thought about, but I know I didn't let it go. And I think that's important as well as reshaping the moment. And then, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Sukenya? Sukenya. Spoke about the Matisse, which I was wondering, my understanding of the word Matisse was that it was a bad word in Paris. Is it not in Senegal?
No.
Yeah,
It's rather a word that it used to have a lot of respect associated with it during our period of colonization.
Okay, because when it's used in Paris, it seems to be used as a slur. So it's interesting to hear you use it not in that place. And in the last presentation, I talked a little bit about the essay about margin, Bell Hook's essay, where she talks about the margin as a place of radical openness. And I felt like here again, we were hearing that despite the post-colonial history and structure that might have shaped present-day Senegal, there was a real sense of like, this is my country, this is my citizenship, this is what I own, and I own it. So that was different. I didn't agree with your, if I'm understanding you correctly, I didn't agree with the part of your argument that talked about the lack of citizenship here for African Americans. I feel like we, I feel as a citizen here, and I think that despite its problems, I actually am very, very happy to be an American citizen. And I, have lived in other countries, and I'm also always very happy when I come back to the States. Because there is a way in which things are on the surface here. We have a lot of problems, I'm not saying that. And we have a deep history of racism. But unlike Tennessee's coasts between the world and me, I don't see moving to France as any kind of solution. I don't think that because another culture turns its gaze on someone else. I think if you are from North Africa in France, you are experiencing a very similar dynamic than we are receiving here. So just because as an American I might slip out of that particular country's dynamic doesn't mean the dynamic doesn't exist and couldn't as easily shift itself back to me. At least here, I think that we have the discussion. What's different about the United States and many of the European cultures is that they're not armed in the way that we are. So that our challenges end up too often in death. And that's what makes us radically different, I'm afraid. But we have a kind of educational system, a kind of trajectory possible in this country that's not possible anywhere else. Perhaps in Africa, but not, certainly not in Europe. And Sabina, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
I felt that your piece was also, there was another piece about the Sai earlier today, and I love that your piece also expanded the Sai into a sound, into the act of throwing shade, and that the dynamic around the story that you told was also about being willing and able to take the consequences of speaking back. That whether or not one felt it was unjustified, whether or not other people's reaction wouldn't have gotten that response, that one still responds. And the response sometimes will mean detention, it will mean unjust attention, but that you still won't be silenced from the response. And I think that's important. I think that in an odd way, it's more important that we don't take into our bodies what doesn't belong to us. And so if that means also taking the consequences, we take the consequences. If that means that people are not going to talk to you when you come in the room because they think you're too sensitive, oh well. Because it isn't our job to hold the hatred that comes to us. It's our job actually to give it back, I think. So that then we can move knowing that at least we weren't party to our own self-destruction. Well, thank you so much.